to get to your first million literally took almost a full decade. Once we reached that million, to get to 3 million took less than 6 months. And then going from 3 million to 10 million, again, another maybe 1 year or two. Then from 10 million to 20 million, again, another 5. And now we're approaching the $30 million marker, and it all just starts to cascade and snowball.
Hi, I'm Mike Pincus, co-founder at Connect CPA and your host at GrowthTales. Today we have two awesome guests. We've got Daniel and Greg, who are the co-founders and owners of the Weststate Group, which is one of the industry leaders in workforce management solutions. This is really a truly unique entrepreneurial story where Daniel and Greg have been in business for around 20 years, they started this thing as teenagers and have scaled a multi-million-dollar corporate group of companies to well over 1,000 employees. And just to give a quick overview of the companies, and guys, I apologize if I'm missing any of them. We've got Gatsby Valet, which is in valet and parking management. We've got Caraway, which is in traffic management. We've got Weststate Security, which is in security solutions. We've got Red, which is a boutique event staffing agency. And then we've got Parkenda, which is technology play with turnkey valet automation and technology. Wow. You guys have built a hell of a company, and thank you for hopping on and joining me.
Thank you, Mike. Glad to be here.
So I've known you guys for a while, and I, in other circles, I brag about what you guys have built, not only because you've been at this for so long and have played that long tail by playing the long game and being together in business for so long, but you guys have built a multi-group of companies, which is huge. I would love to know the origin story of how you guys got started, because you were so young when you guys started this business. And most people, when they're teenagers, are thinking of their first job in corporate Canada, America, etc., where they put on a suit and tie. How did you guys get started? How do you know each other?
I would say I've known Daniel since I was 6 months old. So his mom was my babysitter. She took care of me since I was 6 months. And I used to poke him in the little strawberry basket as a kid back in the day. And we grew up there under the table at Javon's house, his mother's. And that's how we first met. We went to grade school together, then high school. And then we pursued a few other ideas prior to this one here. But we always thought, let's get into business. So that's how we first met. It was through grades. My parents got introduced to him. His mom is my second mom. So
yeah. Greg and I have been childhood friends, high school, grade school, and it wasn't until really towards the end of high school when we started to really come together and say, let's start a business. I had always been sort of entrepreneurial. In grade school, selling little lighters and fake watches, and high school selling, essentially the high school bookie, right? Before online gambling existed, and you just had Proline. So I'd always been very entrepreneurial in that sense, and Greg,
I just worked. I had 3 different jobs. I was a janitor during the at night, while going to school, while working at a gas station, while working as a doorman. So my work ethic was just keep working. Daniel had a different spin on things. So
and so we towards the end of high school and then leading into university, we decided, let's start a business. We both agreed we want to be business owners. So he went to Guelph Humber University. I went to Humber College, which is in the same building up on Highway 27 there in Rexdale area. And so we were going through the motions. Okay, what business should we start? That was the question. And we arrived at this idea. Again, this is around 2002, 2003, around there, where we wanted to start a juice business. And this is actually right when Booster Juice came on the scene. Even just before Booster Juice, we had a business idea called Fit Stop, and I actually still have the drawings of like the logo.
You took it pretty far.
Yeah, and we went to Humber College because we wanted to open up at campus. So what we realized, though, obviously, aside from going through the motions and all the roadblocks, getting turned down at 18 years old at that point and 17 by these schools because A, you have no experience, and B, we realized we didn't have the money. There was a lot of capex cost.
Yeah.
So we kind of had to go back to the drawing board. And it was around this time that I really started reading a lot. Like I got introduced to just, this quote, which was, where you're going to be in 5 years is dictated by the books you read and the people you meet. And so I started just reading everything. A lot of leadership books like John C. Maxwell and Dale Carnegie, Think and Grow Rich, like all those classics. But one particular book came on my desk, and it was The Origin and Evolution of New Business by Amar Bide. And in that book, he had basically studied the origin and, of course, evolution of all these businesses, but more so the origin of what stuck to me, which was that majority of multi-million-dollar companies was actually started with $5,000 or less. That's the statistic. And I'm like, what, $5,000 or less? And so that changed my framework. So every time that Greg and I would conjure up a business idea, we put it through the lens. Can you start this with $5,000 or less? Yes or no? And that was the framework that we started to, reevaluate these ideas. And so we obviously nixed the FitStop idea because it didn't fit that model. Mm-hmm. And so we started exploring. And I don't know, obviously our friends and family knew we wanted to start a business, and we were just still kind of waiting for this idea to pop. And it didn't come with Greg and I. It actually came from a mutual friend that gave us this idea of, hey, why don't you guys start a valet business? And I just came back from the States, and I see valet operators all over the place. In Canada in 2000, and this is around 2003, 2004, he's like, we don't see many valet operators. And because I was very tech oriented, and I went through everything from MS-DOS all the way to Windows 95 and so on and so forth. As soon as dial-up internet came, I was on that. So I was very tech oriented. So I did some Google searches right then and there, and of course nothing showed up. So I called Greg. I said, this is it. This is the business. We can do this for $5,000 or less. I did a Google search. There's no competition. Meanwhile, there was plenty of competitors. It's just they weren't online yet. So we were pretty much the first valet company to have a website, right? Thinking that we had the whole marketplace to ourselves. So, which obviously was not true. So in reality, we said, okay, this is the business we're going to start. And so we started building the website, of course, being the first to market with a website. And it was pretty much like within 3 months, we had our first paid contract. It was our first paid deal. And it wasn't even valet parking. So this is a little fun fact for anyone who knows us, that the very first check we got written was actually not for valet. It was for mobile car wash service at a golf club in Caledon called Devil's Pulpit. And it was to basically, the thing was, we want you, while all the guests are golfing, we want you to wash all the cars. And there's like 150 of them. So that was the first gig. And that was, I think, like in August of 2004. And we weren't even incorporated by then. We were incorporated with the name Gatsby Valet, which Greg came up with that name, which was a phenomenal business name. And that had great, brand recognition and resonance with the clientele that we were servicing. Because our aim was to do, big parties and galas and.
So like the actual Gatsby, that's where Gatsby comes from.
Chivalry, that's where that concept came from.
The clients that would hire us are probably well read. Who hasn't read the book Gatsby? So you'll remember that before anything else. And we were looking at Donald Trump coming to town with the Trump Tower and the statistics on Ferraris in Toronto compared to the rest of the world. There's money here, so we thought they need a service. And I don't know if I'll be stealing Daniel's thunder here, but it did come from my nightclub job. I was working as a bar back, and then a doorman, and then we started the valet company right out front of a nightclub. I told the guy I want to start a company. He's like, "Be here next week. We'll get someone else," and we had to be there. So we just worked our entire, I'd say 18 to whatever age we were, out front of this nightclub every single weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And that's, my parents, my mom she would say, no one will ever pay you $20 to park a car. No one's got that kind of money.
Yeah.
And we stuck it out. Daniel had the foresight to say, after making, say, $1,000 a night, to say, no, we're going to leave and hire somebody else. For me, I looked at it like I had to make $96 a day. That was my objective to get past to work for myself. That's all. I was working for the city of Toronto at the time, and that was my paycheck. So if I got past that every single day, I could run my own business, and that kind of dictated where I'd go with my next path.
It's interesting. Like, you guys were outside of a nightclub, but you mentioned, Greg, like Trump Towers, like the fact that you were thinking about hotels and other avenues that valet would be applicable. How did you guys, like, when you guys decided on valet, did you have like a list of all the potential areas you'd be able to service? Because you said you didn't see any valets in Toronto back in 2003, 2004, but you probably had to think of, where would valets even be applicable? Like, who are the customer segment that would need valet? How did you go about that exercise together?
I guess on my end, we kind of winged it, I would say, to be honest with you. I think it was more of a winging on my end. I think if I let Daniel dig up all the stats and do all that preparation work, would have taken a long time. Daniel's very methodical and make sure it's done right. I kind of run in there and get the contract, and then we'll figure it out afterwards. So, I don't think we even thought about that. We said, okay, we have a chance to do something at night on our own, and let's see where this goes, and then dig into it afterwards. So,
yeah, I mean, Mike, you got to realize, Greg and I grew up like middle class. We lived in a suburb of Toronto called Etobicoke. So I've never actually seen a valet operation before. Like, I've only seen it in movies, right? And I would never frequent hotels. I wouldn't be going downtown. Like, so you got to imagine, like, we don't really understood that industry. And obviously America is where, the majority of valet operations exist, and it still does to this day. It's way more advanced out in the States in terms of demand and presence than in Canada. But obviously in 2004, compared to now, it's a drastic change as well. Of course, the cityscape has grown exponentially, and just the wealth creation in those 20 years has been monumental. So in terms of research or business planning and that sort of thing, there really wasn't much of that going on.
Mm-hmm.
It was really just, like Greg had mentioned, just stuff thrown at us, right? Where, we put it out in the ether that, we want to be in this business. And then he says to one person says to another. And then all of a sudden the nightclub owner gets wind of that Greg wants to start this business. Well, actually, you know what? I want valet outside of my nightclub, coincidentally. Mm-hmm. Be here next week. That's it. And then it just got thrown on our laps. And that's as far as we thought. It was never really thinking much further than that. Remember, we're 19 years old. And I look at my nephews that are 19, 20, and like, I'm putting myself in their shoes. Like, wow, how do we even do that? Right?
Yeah. And I think what you guys bring up a valid point. Action normally beats preparation, and you guys just took action and just went with it. And I guess on that, I'm kind of curious. You guys have been friends, obviously, a very, very long time, going all the way back to like when you were this big. So, but 20 years in business, it's different to be friends than it is to be business partners or co-founders. You guys have managed to be in business, and obviously entrepreneurship's not for the faint of heart. I mean, there's ups and downs. You don't meet a single entrepreneur without war wounds of dealing with just the things that get thrown at you as you're growing. How have you guys managed to stay together for 20 years and survive in that partnership together for all of these years? And I'm sure you both have a unique perspective on this as to what makes the two of you work together.
I'll let Greg start. I'm very curious to see what he thinks before I tackle that question.
Say something nice, Greg.
I would say a big thing is carve the lane out. That's been a big reason why we don't kill each other. Like, I was looking at pictures on my old computer the other day, And it was literally like we started this out of a room with two desks right in front of each other. I'm making calls, he's making calls, but we'd always had different responsibilities. That's kind of how we assigned it. I knew my strengths, he knew his. We always, everyone laughs at our relationship because we're like a husband and wife, and we will bicker and be like, well, this is the right answer. And we're still fighting over the exact right answer, but we see it, we have a different perspective on things. And like I said, I think carving out lanes really helped us get to where we are today. And I would not be where I am today without Daniel. And I don't know if he'll say that now, but I think he thinks it down deep in that heart there. But yeah, it's
keep going.
No, it's enough. Your head's getting big enough already here. So.
No, I think Greg's confusing the here and now than the origin era. We're talking about laneway reviews now, especially now that we've hired a CEO and CFO to help us grow our business, which we'll get into. But in the early days, and obviously through that, the middle era, I would say that there's really it comes down to a couple of things in my mind. Like the first is trust. I think at the foundational level, if you don't have trust between partners, you cannot build upon anything. The foundation has to be on trust. And I think trust is not something that is given, it's something that's earned. And I think how it's earned is through the work, the output, right? The dedication. I think early on, Greg showed me and I showed him how dedicated I was to this idea. Because, as friends, you hang out and you come up with ideas. And then I always say this to him. I'm like, what really separates real entrepreneurs, real business owners from those who are not are, what are you doing on Monday morning? I always say this because on the weekends is when you have these ideas, you have all this inspiration, you talk, but then I look around and I see no one's doing anything on Monday morning.
Right.
And that separated me and Greg from the rest was Monday morning, I'm calling him saying, okay, remember how we spoke about this on Saturday night? Well, I've done some research. I'm doing work. I'm doing things based on those ideas. And a lot of people, they don't take the action. They come up with a lot of ideas, but there's no execution of the ideas. And I think that is more important than the idea itself at times. So I think early on, like when we were 19, that to me was this back and forth was building trust. Me and him and me, showing that I was creating tangible output and he was creating tangible output. And because we saw that in each other, that continued to fester and grow. So I think that to me is the foundational layer first. And then I think later on, as that momentum built and continued on, I think really what started to help shape, as you said, it's tough. How do you stay in business together with partners that young? And now we're almost in our 40s. Like Greg just turned 40 and I'm going to be crossing that bridge next year. That's 2 decades. And especially during that era, in your 20s, so much going on in your life, right? To stay afloat in business and personal, and to thrive in both of those is a challenge. I think to navigate those waters, really, it's equality. I think we always strived for equality, meaning that everything got to be split down 50-50. You should never do anything that is going to only benefit your interest and not the other person's interest. Right. And ensuring that we have an agreement that you're not going to start anything without me and I'm not going to start anything without you. We're always going to do everything 50-50. Always. We'll never go into new ventures without each other. And we literally bought our first house together, 50-50. And we lived together when we bought our first house when we were 22. So from 19 to 22, we saved up enough cash to put our down payment on our first house in Etobicoke, detached, 50 by 150 lot. We were so proud of. And we obviously rented a portion of the home to our friends. So it became a big party house, obviously in our 20s. And that's where we made business out of. So, equality, trust. And the last, to me, the other 2 that comes to my mind is luck. I think luck and my luck what I believe is lucky for him and I think a lot of other business partners may not be this lucky, was that we had such complementary skill sets. And I think Greg alluded to it. Not only from just straight skills, like his skills are different than my skills, but they actually they're completely polar opposite. So together we form one great entrepreneur, but individually we don't. So not only from a skill set, but also from a behavioral profile. So our company, every employee goes through a behavioral assessment, because I really believe in that. And actually we started this program called Predictive Index last year. And if you look at our profiles, it's literally the exact opposite. Every behavioral component is the exact opposite. If my A is far to the right, his A is far to the left. If my B is far to the right, his is far to the left. So I think that in of itself was just lucky. Because as a kid, you wouldn't know that was the case. You just were friends. You don't know why you're friends and so on and so forth, right? But from a business perspective, we got lucky there. And to go in tandem with that luckiness is the timing. I say this to everyone. If you started a business in 2003 or 2004 in Toronto, it's very hard not to be successful. And you say, how? Just think about it. The wealth created from 2004, the city of Toronto experienced the biggest real estate growth, the biggest business growth, population growth. How could you not succeed? Anyone who started in that era should be successful in this era just by the fact that you started at the perfect time. Not just for Valet, every business grew in that time frame. And that's from my perspective, the timing. So yeah, I think all of those were all in favor of how, we were able to survive for 20 years.
And Greg, I'm wondering, how did Daniel just explained, you explained really well here, what makes you guys click together and stay together over the long haul. But I'm kind of curious, how do you split your responsibilities day to day? You're now running a big company, like multiple companies under a corporate group. Greg, what do you do versus what does Daniel do on a day-to-day basis? What are those lanes, as Daniel was alluding to, that you guys take ownership over?
The way we looked at it now, and Daniel kind of made this pretty simple. On my end, we know what the objective is for sales. We know where we want to be in 5 years. If we don't get that number, it's me. I'm at fault for that. I am the reason we didn't get there. And there could be 1,000 other micro reasons below it, but at the end of the day, I am completely at fault for not getting that number. And we have different strategies. There's a few different ones we're going to use to get that number, whether we're going to grow each company individually, expand the verticals, acquisition, whatever it might be. It's on me. I've got to get that number. That's my responsibility at this point. And Daniel's taken on a sort of a different role there, but I'll let him talk about that one.
Yeah. So again, going back to the laneway review, this is something that has been part of our topics of conversation meetings these last few weeks and months, due to the fact that we brought in a CEO to help us run our business and our day to day, as well as a CFO to assist on that front. Those are two very important decisions that were made recently, and we're starting to, which are, to me, I started to bear fruit. I can already see the benefits happening. But again, when it's a natural evolution, I believe, as a business owner is going through a growth that we've gone through in the last 2 decades, but more so in the last, I would say, 5 years. Again, I always say to get to your first million literally took almost a full decade.
Yeah.
So imagine that full 20 years, we couldn't get past $1 million in sales. Once we reached that million, to get to 3 million took less than 6 months. And then going from 3 million to 10 million, again, another maybe 1 year or two. Then from 10 million to 20 million, again, another 5. And now we're approaching the $30 million marker, and it all just starts to cascade and snowball. So this evolution requires that there's lane, realizing what your skills are and what you typically gravitate towards. And I think, removing ourselves from the day-to-day operations of the business by getting a CEO, getting a CFO to handle that and lead that team. So Greg can focus, like he alluded to, on the bigger picture. Mergers and acquisitions right now is the phase that we're at. Going into new business verticals under the West Egg Group umbrella, or adding or acquiring businesses already in the sectors that we already service, and which I call like organic acquisitions. And on my end, what I've always gravitated towards was the system side, the automation side. And now, of course, like everyone, the big catchphrase now, AI. So how can we bring in the latest technology to improve our day-to-day workflows for all our business operating units that we have under the West Egg Group umbrella? That's my laneway. I'm naturally a visionary, and so is Greg. Greg, naturally, we can see things that others can't see from a macro level. And so bringing in that vision, communicating that vision to the CEO, to the team, to the department heads, and executing on those visions is what excites me and what excites Greg. And so that's kind of like where we see ourselves within the West Egg Group in the next evolution that we're about to embark on. Greg and I have some ambitious goals that Greg alluded to. We have a 5-year mission, 100 million by 2028. So we've set that target. So now everything has to be in alignment with that. All the decisions we make how do we grow to that level, that scale in the next 5 years? So that's kind of like where we are right now in our chapter.
And those are big moves. A CEO, a CFO, these are C-suite titles, and you guys built this company. And what I always wonder, I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs think about this, is when you're an entrepreneur, like not all entrepreneurs have ego, but when you're young and you're building a company, sometimes having an ego is strength, meaning you're willing to go through walls and barriers and build and build. But to be the co-founders and to give someone a title CEO it takes a lot of humility to do something like that, because you guys built this multi-million-dollar company, and then all of a sudden someone's got what's perceived as the top title, CEO. I'm curious, first of all, how did you come to that decision? And is it that after 20 years of doing this, it's just being objective and being humble and saying, like, where are our best strengths, and do we need outside help at this size in order to help us get to the next level? I wanted to just know, with handing out those titles, it sounds like it was a big decision. How did you come to it? And does ego play into that at all, of like, hey, we're going to let go of all ego and say, you know what, we don't need the CEO title or whatever it might be?
I can tell you that, again, as you know, Greg and I are complete polar opposites, so we would probably have different perspectives on this. I personally, this decision's much easier for me in the sense that I have always tried to run under the radar. I remember many times when I would operate, like, obviously I had to work on the curb in the early years, and I would never like to say that I'm the owner of the company. I would always pretend I'm just an employee. Mm-hmm. Part of that was to do with, I wanted to always pretend as if the company was bigger than it actually was. So my title would be, account manager, even though I was the owner. By putting account manager, it made the company seem bigger. As an example. So I think for me, there is no ego. Titles to me are just titles. It's what you do. Again, going back to that foundation, that trust level to me, I judge someone based on their output. What, i.e. results, what have you produced? Titles to me doesn't really matter, but it is important as we go along and realize that titles are important to a lot of people. It's what they put on their resume. It does have bearing, but as a small business owner and then growing into an enterprise level company, you realize that that's not the case for everyone. So we do pay attention that titles do matter to people. And it does set the expectations and their role, their responsibility, essentially, defines that. But ultimately, the decision was not that difficult at all for me. What is difficult is, again, just navigating that new environment. But one of the things that really separates us from a lot of companies, I feel, is that, we're adapters. That if there's one word that encapsulates us, it's adapting. During COVID, we adapted. We grew out of COVID. Whereas a lot of people were shutting down, we pivoted. We got in. We adapted to the situation and redirected our resources and workforce to services that we thought were needed during that time frame, and we attained new business out of that. Actually, our security division was birthed out of that conflict. So, and what I'm not concerned about, again, bringing in 2 new C-suite level, we're going to adapt again. We're going to adapt to this new environment. It's going to take a little bit of time to get used to it. But one thing I'm certain of is that we can adapt to any environment. As the economy changes, as the environment changes, with internally or externally, that's our strength.
Yeah, and Greg, how do you feel about with those lanes and the new people coming on? Has it been easy to adapt to those changes, or is it new? Because it's been the two of you at the helm all these years. Is it like a new thing to adapt to, I guess, as Daniel alluded to?
Yeah, it's relatively new still. Still getting used to trusting the way that someone else leads. I know what I would do in situations, but thinking big picture, they probably have the exact same idea, just a different way of getting to the finish line.
Right.
So just stepping back and letting the team do what they do. It's been a challenge on my part because I want to get involved. I've been so involved. I have clients and relationships. I really, really, they're important to me. These clients of mine that I've worked with for years, and they trust me. They trust what I've promised them, and I still want to make sure they're getting that. But I think we made the right call. We've got a great guy who's leading that now, and it's just letting that go. That's been the hard part for me. But as Daniel says, he's like, put everything back there and focus on how we're going to get that goal forward. It's really trying to remember that every single day. That's been the I wouldn't say a challenge, but there's noise in the background that always I hear a client that's unhappy, and I want to get involved when I really should. That's the challenging part. So yeah, good otherwise.
No, that's awesome, and I think that's something that's probably hard at scale, guys, right? Because like you're now a bigger company, and your time becomes more and more valuable. Meaning, like your time might have been $100 an hour opportunity cost in the early days, and then $1,000 an hour, then $10,000 an hour. And then at some point it becomes, you can't quantify it, meaning you just need more time, right? And I feel like there's a lot, I think it does show a lot of humility to bring on help to get to like what is a really audacious goal. And at the end of the day, when you own a business, I mean, you've got equity, meaning like you want to make that pie as big as it is. And at least I've seen, and we work with a lot of companies, sometimes you get drawn into wanting to do everything yourself. And so something stays smaller than it could have been if you didn't get outside help. And so, but yeah, that humility part is something that you don't always see, which kind of brings me to my next question. Now that you do have this new, not only vision to where you guys want to go 100 million coming up to, I guess you said 2000 and what was the number?
100 million 2028,
which is a big number, short period of time to get there. Is acquisitions, you guys have now dabbled in acquisitions. Dan, you mentioned Greg is the one leading a lot of the acquisition, I guess, makeup of how you guys figure out who fits in. My question is, how do you figure out if someone's a fit or a company is a fit for the Westlake Group, like to bring into your portfolio and be a part of your culture? How do you guys figure out what kind of companies, who's the right fit? What's that process look like?
Like Daniel said, with trust, it's something that's earned. It's tough to do right off the bat. Like the one big one we just did recently with our security side there, that took months of side by side talking. We dated before we got married. We started working on other little ideas, and I'd throw some work to him. He'd throw some back. I'd see how quick he'd respond. So essentially, I was we'd be courting each other for months on end, just to see how close is he and work ethic like Daniel and I. If
Right.
something, if things went wrong, is he going to put his hands up and I'm going to have to get into it, or is he going to be able to handle the that ship and steer that ship without me? So it's I guess it's just like any relationship. How do you know you want to stick with that person for a very long time? You got to date him. You got to try it. Keep talking. Keep conversations going. Work through some adversity together to see if you can get past certain things, and go from there.
Yeah, I think just to further that, in terms of like deciding what business verticals to add to the West Egg Group, what I call NBVs, new business ventures, as opposed to just an acquisition of a business that's already a service that we offer. With regards to NBVs, I think it's a matter of looking at what the West Egg Group, what our core competency is, like what value do we bring that a business owner that's, let's say, doing under $1 million a year, because we went through that 10-year period, like I mentioned before, where a lot of business owners will not get past that.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that reason is they number one, the trust. It goes back down to trust. They just don't trust other people to do the work as good as them. And part of that is because they haven't developed the systems required to manage and monitor those people that you're delegating that work to. Part of it could be just because they lack the skill set to do that task. Part of it could be because, again, they just flat out don't trust. They have a hard time trusting people to execute. So, part of our focus really is finding these business owners that lack those skill sets to scale and use the systems effectively. And as you know, with tech, it's every month there's a new software coming out that needs to be evaluated,
right,
determine if it can be integrated within the environment of the company. And they just lack that time, right? So this is something that, if the business unit fits under the scale, under what we call a frontline workforce. So again, the verticals that we're in is parking and valet, security, food and beverage staffing. We're exploring cleaning and janitorial services. So any frontline workforce labor type business model can be assimilated and brought into the West Egg Group management system. And we can provide tremendous value to those entrepreneurs who are looking to really, they have a large piece of a very small pie at the moment. And with the West Egg Group, we can offer them a smaller piece, but of a much larger pie.
right.
Where you can begin to have real talks of exit planning down the road, and just being around like-minded business owners together under one roof. That peer-to-peer type environment, it can't be overstated, right? It provides so much value. And then, of course, the marketing umbrella, the marketing synergies together, having one unified sales force selling all these services under one umbrella, is something that we feel has a lot of value to the client base that we service.
Yeah. And I would say what you guys are building is, as you mentioned, it's incredible that by bringing all of these services under one umbrella, the whole is greater than the sum. I don't know what the saying is, but the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, meaning like when you bring all these things together, you're adding so much value to your customers because they don't need to go and get 18 different vendors. They've got a one-stop shop for security, for valet, for park, and the list goes on and on, event management, and you become the de facto shop for everything, which is incredible. And I want to be respectful of your time, guys. And I know we're a tiny bit over here, but my last question for you guys: 20 years together, scaling a multi-million-dollar business, multi-8-figure business. What's next for you both? I know you've got that big target of 2028. But what's next for Greg and Daniel?
Well, Greg just got engaged, so I'm sure he's
congratulations. Popping champagne is what's next.
Yeah.
Next. I am married and 2 kids, so just kind of watching them grow personally on the personal side, and obviously we talked at length on the business side in terms of where we're heading, our goals, and kind of reverse engineering how you 3x the business in 5 years essentially. So that's going to be fun, and again, it's going to require adaptation, and it's just an evolution. It's what it is, and I'm really excited about AI, and I believe in the workforce management sector. There is a lot of innovation still required in that space, and so we're building some new softwares aimed at bringing some of the top AI and automation tools to workforce management, from scheduling and time and attendance sector all the way through recruitment, training, and retention. The 3 pillars of success in our business we've coined is recruit, train, retain. So everything we do is on those premises. How do we get better at recruiting? How do we get better at training? How do we get better at retaining? And so I believe there's a lot of innovation still required in that space that has not been capitalized on. So that's kind of like where I'm shifting my focus, where Greg, again, is just adding more business units for more billable hours, right? Our business model is based on billable hours. So the more billable hours we do in the various business services, that's how we reach that top line. And my goal is to make that bottom line grow. So how do we be more leaner? We've got a very large offshore component to our business, where we've allowed to be more lean on the M&A side, but I feel there's still a lot of improvement still on that side. So that's kind of where I'm seeing the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, guys, really appreciate you jumping on and telling your story. It's an incredible story, and I love the fact that you guys have figured out how to split your roles, even at over 1,000 employees, to with that much going on, the fact that you guys have had staying power, and also I talk about you guys a lot as being this success story where let's be real, 90 something % of businesses fail, but most don't even get to 10 years. And I think the stats something like 0.1% of businesses get to 8 figures. You guys have done it all. You've crossed the 10 mark, you've crossed the 8-figure mark, and you still like each other. So kudos to both of you, and congrats again on what you've built at the Weststate Group. And I'm excited to see, we're going to keep in touch, and I'd love to get an update every year up to 2028. It's a big number and a big audacious goal, but if anybody can get there, I think you guys can get there. And thanks again for taking the time, because like I said, I don't know what your hourly rate is worth today, but it's obviously a big number.
I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you so much for having us.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Greg. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.